following is an exclusive presentation of the Ultimate Hoops Podcast Network.
The most exciting moment for me, after winning the championship, the most exciting thing for me, and I'm very, very strange about things. Like, I will obsess about something and I will almost like will it to happen. When I was in New York, I willed Spike Lee to come to our game. I would say as soon as I got there, I said, I'll know I made it when Spike Lee's at our game. And people were like, yeah, right. And he came to our game. It was like the first time he ever came to a Liberty game, and he came. And I'm like, thank you, God. I knew, and so for me in Minnesota, the thing that I was obsessed about was every time we go to the airport, I would always be so bothered that there was no Lynx gear at the airport. This one little, it was like all the sport, it was like a sports shop or whatever. And I would just fantasize about one day the Lynx stuff will be in that store and I won't have to, and it was just one little thing that I would obsess about. And then after we won the championship, our stuff was in that store, and it's been in that store. And I even went in that store and I was like, thank you. I've been, and it was in there, and it just changed like everything. Every time I'd go to the airport, I would just walk by the store and just look and just say like, yes, it happened. So, I really, really strongly feel like, there's gotta be steps.
Sure. March 1st, 2013. You were traded to the Shock. So this was post 2012 season.
Traded.
Yeah. Well, now hold on a second. Now, did the Lynx lose in the finals?
We did. We lost to Indiana.
Okay. You're traded on March 1st, 2013. Tell me what happened.
Well, this is where things get really complicated because, I can only speak for myself. I can only speak for, when I do this. I'm not trying to just, blow up a whole industry or anything like that. But for me, one of the things that I'm most proud about in my career in the WNBA is that I've never really, even though, I guess technically this is untrue, but I've never been traded. When I went to Tulsa, I wanted to go to Tulsa. I wanted to specifically go to Tulsa. And I didn't mind at the time, that I just didn't care that people thought that I got traded or whatever. I didn't matter. It was a three-way trade. And but it really wasn't a three-way trade. And from my point, I actually asked to go to this specific team. Can you get me here? And I was still under contract with Minnesota, which is where the trade comes in, because I was still technically, and I would I have loved to play that 2013 season in Minnesota in a perfect world? Yes, but was that going to happen? Was a perfect world going to happen in Minnesota? No, it wasn't. And that whole aspect of how that happened is a whole nother story, and it is surrounds the 2012 playoffs, and I think it contributed a lot to the reason why we may have lost that championship. But really, what it comes down to, me wanting to leave Minnesota for Tulsa, was I wanted peace. I wanted peace in a locker room situation. I told you earlier that the hardest adjustment I ever made was, and for me making the WNBA, was that culture. And, and this isn't an attack on any specific thing, but it's just what it just was the climate for me. So in my opinion, I wasn't free to make my own choice, but I kind of was. So I really wanted to be in a place where I could be successful. I was getting very tired of having to fight so much in such a kind of a quiet way, and it was really frustrating me, and it was frustrating me because it was affecting me psychologically. It was affecting me, my spirit. I was very, very, I was just in a really not a good place. And so I needed to get away from that. And again, like I said, I'm not going to be very specific about that for intentionally, But but what Tulsa did was Tulsa provided for me a place where, first of all, I knew we were going to draft Skylar Diggins, who Skylar is like a sister to me. She's her and I have been very, very close since early January 2010. We've been, I would say, best friends, and she was just so important. I think just to be in, all I really wanted was to be in a place where I knew for a fact that I was going to have a peaceful, I didn't care what people thought, oh, you're on a losing team or this or that. I was excited about the idea of building something again and starting over again. And I was excited about being in a friendly space. And I knew that I could achieve that. Like you asked me, who was your best friend on the Lynx? And I had very close people, but, with Tulsa, absolutely Skylar. And it just makes it, I still always kept it very business. My whole career has always been business. But at least with playing with Skylar and playing with the players on the Tulsa Shock, it was every day was so happy. It was my favorite season. Really, I would, in a lot of ways, it was so much fun because I could just come and I could do the things that I love to do without feeling all this extra stuff. And the highlight, I would say, of it all was every time we played against the Minnesota, and just, the very first game I think it was 18 points against Minnesota. And then the greatest part was, I know in 2013, Minnesota won the championship, but just a few weeks before they won the championship, we played Minnesota at Target Center, and we beat them for the first time in Tulsa franchise history. First time ever, and I was instrumental part of that. I was able to be a starter, something that I wasn't going to be developing in Minnesota. And it wasn't always about like starting and not starting, playing time, things like that. But I was ready for a role. I wanted to move up. You want to be in a position where you have more leadership ability. I was 26, turning 27, and I was 26 years old when I played in Tulsa. I was ready to be a leader. I wanted to be in a position where I could, and I felt like it was going to give me more value as a player instead of just being really kind of buried. I was starting to feel like I was getting buried in Minnesota. So that was really where that came from. It wasn't, there's a lot of complex, like I said, things kind of that go along with that maybe I'd go into in further detail that you'd have to check out or stay tuned for. But I would say, that was what it was. And it ended up being a great thing for me because I had a lot of success, that season. And I think it just put me in a different light. People weren't able to I changed my number to 2 after my dad. And that was another thing too. After I won the championship in 2011, it just changed. I started researching my dad more. I totally compartmentalized him and just thought he was this horrible man. And I learned about him, and I discovered that he was this great, great man. And I started just feeling very different about my career and what I wanted. So that's just kind of it in a nutshell.
Well, we'd love to hear more about the Lynx stuff, but we'll wait for another day, I guess. The Los Angeles Sparks, the following season, you signed with the Sparks. Feel good to come home?
Yes. And, again, I was in Israel when I signed with the Sparks. I was finally a free agent. It was my first year being a free agent. Even the trade with Tulsa, even though it felt like I made this move, I was still under contract with the Lynx. So it was still, this was just and I had to actually figure that out because I thought that I didn't know what my status was. I was a free agent. So I signed with LA, and a lot of that had to do it was just like a heart decision. Definitely had to do with coming home, playing on the Sparks, that being the team that I always loved. And then the big, big reason was when Magic decided, when they went bankrupt and Magic bought the Sparks, it just felt to me, it all just made sense of like coming home and just being and starting anew.
And I mean, the following year, you go across the country to New York. Well,
yes.
Was this a specific choice to move all the way across the country? Yes,
and I call it "Give me liberty or give me death." And again, without sharing too much about it, because it is, it was definitely a journey, and it was, the experiences that I've had have not been, they haven't been for just happenstance. Like I really invested time to think about all of these moves, But I will say that I started thinking about my health became a big issue for me. My health, not just mental health, but physical health too. At this point, I'm 8 surgeries in. And like I said, not every franchise is the same in terms of how they can provide, and it's not like, there's no, I'm a special case. I know that I take a different type of care and attention. And so I think for me, that was what really drew me to New York. And I've said this before, even right after I decided to retire, a lot of that was based on, the fact that Laura Ramus, who was the head athletic trainer for the Liberty at the time, I really, really trusted and believed that New York was going to be a great place for my body wise, and just for a good place for me to excel, because, I hurt myself in LA. I tore my knee again. And that was really just kind of, it was a huge, it just changed kind of everything and just the decisions I was going to make. And so it was hard though. I felt like leaving LA, it felt like that was a big building to leap off of. And to go from LA to New York, it was huge. It really was. But I was very confident that I was making the right choice. It was scary. It was really, really scary. It wasn't something that, I was necessarily prepared for, I guess, but it was give me liberty or give me death at that point for many reasons.
Which of your WNBA coaches got the most out of you, and how?
That's a very good question. Well, I would say that, it's really, really tough to go from Tara Vanderveer to any other coach for me, especially. It was really, really tough. And all the coaches, I think every coach was great in different ways. You could argue that Cheryl Reeve got a lot out of me. But I would say that the coach that definitely got the most out of me, that really, really, really did was Gary Kloppenberg when I was in Tulsa. And he's a San Diego guy. He grew up in La Jolla. And, because it was just very simple. I think that a lot of times the coaches in the WNBA, for whatever reason, or a lot of times the coaches that I got were coaches who coached against me in the WNBA, And Don Zierden, first of all, let me say, Don Zierden and that first year staff, definitely. So before I move on from Don Zierden, he definitely got the most out of me. He was definitely, it was that first year, from a coaching standpoint, he was awesome. He was a NBA coach. He got it. He understood the nuances that were happening at the time. Julie Plank was the assistant coach. She coached at Stanford with Tara. So she got me right away. And that's why, I was averaging 17 points for most of the season. I think I ended up averaging like 15.7 that whole season. And it was just like he had this trust and this understanding of my ability. Now, the other circumstances kind of affected everything. But I would say he was definitely, but then he left. He went to the Wizards in the NBA, and he was gone after that. After one season, Julie Plank wasn't rehired, and it was just that kind of that was my best year. The coaches, I'm only as good as my coach. I know that. And then I would also say George Diakolos. He's a Greek coach. Now he coaches in Russia. He's one of the best coaches in the world. He definitely got the most out of me. Point blank period. George is incredible. You can ask any players in the WNBA and they'll agree. Like he's just so great. And what he did when he coached me in Greece, he took me to dinner. The team took me to dinner, and he told me, he said, I watched your videos at Stanford. I watched, and then I'm like thinking like, wow. And then he's like, he understood Stanford Candice. He understood those things, and he, actually wanted that player. rather than, I think a lot of times in professional sports, sometimes you don't really necessarily get what you want as a coach. So with that said, so I would say Don Zierden and George they got the best me, and I was able to be successful under their coaching. But I would say Gary Kloppenberg too, because he was, no matter what was happening and whatever the environment or the culture was, it was just such a peaceful season in terms of just trust, communication. I felt like an actual leader. I felt like I actually had authority in a place where I felt like I deserved to have authority, and I never did for whatever reason. I always just felt like, but in this case in Tulsa, I just really was able to have a respect that was just, I didn't receive it really, I felt like any other places. And then when we were in LA, Carol Ross, who was amazing, she got, a lot of times there's a lot of, coaching, it's very, you can get fired, or they leave, or things like that happen. So it's hard to really have that structure. Are you one of the 99% of basketball players who never played professional basketball? Are you tired of trying to live your hoop dreams in the same old rec basketball leagues? At Ultimate Hoops, we believe that all basketball players should be treated like a professional. And with Ultimate Hoops League, we have completely revolutionized recreational basketball. With the Ultimate Hoops League, you'll get full online stats for every game, including box scores, videos, photos, power rankings, and your own personal profile that tracks your stats for your entire career. And you can compare your stats with the thousands of other Ultimate Hoops players across the US and Canada. Most Ultimate Hoops leagues cost under $100 a season, which includes 8 regular season games played on Lifetime Fitness's professional quality basketball courts. No matter what your skill level is, the Ultimate Hoops League is the place to take your talents to. Join the largest recreational basketball league in America, the Ultimate Hoops League, by going to uhlife.com to get started.
Yeah, I mean, I think you made a good point about, coaches are the best coaches are the ones who recognize how to get the most out of their players. There's coaches that just coach their way, and then there's say, well, this way doesn't work for this player. And I think that's interesting because you've had, how many coaches approximately have you had?
In the WNBA?
Well, no, dating all the way back to, high school, middle school, 30?
No, probably closer to like 50, really.
Really?
Yeah, I've had a lot of coaches.
Is Tara your favorite?
Well, Terry Banford and Tara. They're Terry and Tara. My high school coach and Tara, definitely.
Okay. Very good. If a team called you today, asked you to come back, what would you tell them?
No. I mean, no team's going to call.
I mean, it's possible.
No, they're not. not after this. No. If a team calls, no team's going to call. But if a team did call, I would just say thank you, but no thank you. But again, there's so many players out there to choose from that it's almost becoming, it's crazy.
Yeah, and there's a lot of episodes coming up that, you talk about retirement and, the depression setting in. You talk about potentially going and playing volleyball. You retired at a young age.
Mm-hmm.
I saw a little advertisement today with David Robinson. It was like an AARP advertisement.
That's great.
And it was talking about how, when he retired in 2003, I believe it was, how he's like, I can do anything I want. Do you feel that way? Do you feel just completely liberated?
Yes, I do. I feel so ready to reconnect with the world and with the people in my life. That's the biggest thing that you sacrifice when you're an entertainer, when you're a sports player, when you're a professional athlete, no matter what you're doing, even from middle school all the way to the professional league, you sacrifice personal relationships. You sacrifice things that make you happy away from the court. And I'm just looking forward to getting back to those relationships that I've had to sacrifice.
Biggest regret since joining the WNBA?
Biggest regret? Probably trying to please everybody. I wish that I just did not try to be so people pleasing and teammates, coaches, you know, with the exception of fans. I'm happy that how I treated that, but just, you know, not everybody is going to understand you, and that's okay.
What are you most looking forward to in retirement? Like the number one thing. Like, try to be as hyper specific as possible. I get it. There's a lot of things to look forward to. I get that.
I think just, you know, being able to wake up every morning and just not feel that burden, not feel that being free from competition, being free from it, genuinely free from competition, and what competitive energy does and the damage that competitive energy does, especially in a environment that is like a place where you're devalued and kind of ignored. What competition does to that environment, that's what I'm looking forward to. Just not waking up to that, you know, just waking up and having not having to compete, not having to, you know, the performance part is okay, because I feel like that's what you develop your talent, your skills for, but it's the competition. It's the competition that nobody sees that I feel so happy every day that I don't have to deal with that anymore. It's not my problem anymore.
Well, you had an amazing career, and I think we covered it in like 7 episodes.
Yeah.
So thank you. And I know they were spaced out a bit. We did the first 3, I think, earlier in this season 1 of Candid with Candice Wiggins, and the remaining 4 were obviously later in the season. Coming into fall now, I guess is when this will be airing. So, okay. Thank you very much for all the information. I learned a ton. I imagine the listeners learned a ton as well. And that's it. Anything else you want to share?
No, just, you know, those were great questions, and, you know, it's a whole lot. So I think that, you know, people are going to have to just stay tuned if you want more information, and just keep your eyes open, because a lot of the things that I've been going through and the things that I've been feeling and that I've been discussing on this, I've journaled and I've written it down, and I talk about it in further detail. So if you have more questions, or if you're curious to know exactly what I'm talking about, just stay tuned and be patient. It's coming.
Thank you for listening to the latest episode of Candid with Candice Wiggins. Remember, you can subscribe to the Ultimate Hoops Podcast Network on iTunes, Stitcher, and SoundCloud, and listen and download other podcasts like The Wild Card with Luke Hanlon, Recreation Nation with Reed Nelson, The Dream League Insider, and the Short Corner Podcast. Thanks to Ultimate Hoops and Lifetime Fitness, who made this all possible. If you want to learn more about Ultimate Hoops and all of our basketball products, go to uhlife.com. We'll be back next week with an all-new episode of Candid with Candice Wiggins.